Hi, I'm James Brookes, and welcome to From the Factory Floor, a conversational podcast about all things startup and tech, brought to you by the folks at Thestartupfactory.tech. So welcome back to From the Factory Floor. I've not got Nairi or Ian with today, but we've managed to actually rope back Alexa. Hi, Alexa.
Hi, good to be back.
Yeah, it's been a while since we managed to actually get you on. You've obviously been too busy with projects recently.
Yeah. This podcast is always a good relaxing half an hour of good conversation. So looking forward to it today.
It's usually the football chat that we have at the start, which very kindly leads me on to our guest today, which is Mark, who we've managed to catch on a good week after City won the league. Hi, Mark.
Hi, James. Hi, Alexa. Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, thanks for coming, and congratulations on to the pair of you on winning the league yesterday. Well, earlier this week. So it's been a really good week for you two.
Yeah, although I'm sure, like Alexa, it had shades of 2012 and Aguero and the roller coaster of emotions. But I suppose the way I've kind of rationalised it is it's a horrible experience in the moment, but boy, is it a great way to win it when the opposition think they've won it. So I'll take it all day long.
Great memory to have.
I mean, it's slightly better than my weekend, but I think the less on that, the better. But I think, obviously, today we've obviously brought you in, Mark, to really talk about your experience that you've had with BankiFi. Obviously, one of the first sort of companies that we work with is TSF. So I think for those sort of listening who maybe haven't heard of BankiFi, do you want to just give a quick overview of yourself and what it is that BankiFi do?
Yeah, sure. And as you say, we were lucky enough to be one of your first, companies that you worked with at the TSF, and both of you played an instrumental role in helping us get going. So, yeah, for the audience, basically, we like to describe ourselves as the fintech that isn't the fintech, and the reason I say that is the majority of the fintech industry has been built to compete and I guess take customers and revenue away from banks, and we kind of buck that trend by actually trying to help banks better understand their small business customers. So we have a tagline of putting banks back at the heart of business, and what that really means is that we want to help to a bank to transform their digital channels, so their mobile and internet channels, from something that's purely transactional to a place where a business owner runs and operates their business. So, we identified a problem or a couple of problems for small business owners in that they're often very time poor and they're often struggling to collect money from people that don't pay them on time. So a lot of the fintech industry has kind of pushed and positioned getting lending more easy, or getting loans to be more easy and more accessible. And we kind of identified that, those two problems for people like us, and I guess people like you running a small business, we're often, as I say, very time poor, and people don't pay us when they should do. So we kind of launched on the back of that, and it's grown from strength to strength. We started out in Manchester, very proud Mancunian roots, but we now have offices in Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, and opened our US office last week. So we're up to 50 odd people, and banks in all over the world, and it's going really well. So you guys have helped us build something really good.
Thanks for that, Mark. I remember when we started, what's now 4 years ago, with a couple of people in a shared co-working space, and where you got now. It has been an amazing journey for me, kind of looking from inside at the beginning, but also from the outside as well. And just want to say congratulations on that. And that's something you did talk about when we spoke last time at the Pragmatic CTO event, about that culture at BankiFi and maintaining it as you grow. So can you maybe expand a bit more on that this occasion as well?
Yeah, sure, and thank you for your kind words about how it's been an interesting ride so far, and I'm sure it'll continue to be interesting as we grow. And as you rightly point out, culture was always something that we placed a heavy emphasis on right from the start. And I guess, if you look over the last 4 years about what's happened in the world and the things that we've all had to live through, culture becomes incredibly important. So, I mean, we try to have a flat structure, and I don't mean flat in that there aren't roles and responsibilities and in the organisation. What I mean by flat is, that everybody's door is open. No matter who you are in the company, you should always feel that you can have a conversation with whoever. You don't have to go through your line manager, or you don't have to feel that politics are preventing you from having a conversation. So that we try and do that, from the outset. As well that I'm big into team sport, have always been into team sport all my life, and kind of I draw a lot of parallels from the way teams function, in a sporting environment into the work environment. So the analogy of a football team functions when, the right back, the centre half, the central midfield player, the centre forward, do their jobs. And if any one of those aren't performing to the best of their abilities, then the team is likely not to win games. And I think that's very true in business and in building teams in technology companies as well. So everyone is empowered to do the job that they do. Everyone is accountable and responsible for what they do. And I think a couple of words as well that we've kind of been touching on recently as we grow. Empathy for your colleagues and respect for your colleagues. So if you don't take that responsibility, that personal responsibility yourself, then that flows into not understanding the role that your colleagues play, and you might make their life and their job harder if you don't take responsibility for your own job. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of make sure that everyone feels the empathy and the respect for their colleagues, and also make sure that they understand that ultimately customers are there to to take our products and pay for our products, and therefore people's salaries and bonuses and all those other things are directly attributable to how we treat our customers. So we believe it's a really, really key important thing is to have that culture instilled with everyone, and that kind of flatness. Just to give you an example, I still do some of the software testing. I still do some of the requirements gathering. I still do looking at the UX designs and what an end user would look at and whether these things are meaningful. And, I think that kind of thing, for me, I enjoy it, but I think it's also important that I get to experience, what people in the organization do on a day-to-day basis, and they get to spend some time with me and don't feel that it's all about, oh, he's the CEO, he's the boss, I can't have a conversation with him. It's about just being a person and talking to people, understanding what they do in their lives, their personal lives. I think all of that stuff just show interest in people, and I think that's the way to do it, and you have to do it in a way that is real and not contrived, because I think people will see through that. So it has to be genuine. And that's I guess what we try and do. So it's about walking the walk rather than talking the talk.
Some excellent points there, Mark, and I absolutely agree about the walking the walk bit and doing everything, as you said, doing bits that might in some other places not be expected of you. And it was a good analogy of football as well, making the best team possible, team that enjoys working with one another. So not looking for top scorers or individuals, but rather a team that will end top of the league and come end at the end of the proverbial season, if you want.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you have and work so hard in the early stages to build that sort of culture, how do you ensure that when you get to expand and grow and hire new members to your team, that you maintain that, and that both they fit and you fit into all that at the same time.
Yeah, that's the kind of, I think, the hardest bit, and I think you articulate it in the right way. I think part of the problem with the hiring process is, people forget that it's actually a two-way thing, and that um, the person that comes for a particular role is only one side of the story. There's a sales job to do, um, by us to the candidates that we want to join the business. So, especially that's the case when you're a small organization. Some people might have some concerns about, your financial stability, or, the way you're doing things, and they might come from a larger organization. So the first thing that we always do, we have a fairly rigorous process, which you guys know pretty well because we kind of inherited it from you. We don't jump straight into asking questions about people's experience and CV and learning about them. The first interview, if that's the right expression, is all about us explaining what we do to the candidates and making sure that they understand the culture that we're building, the flexibility that we've got. But to go back to those points I raised on the previous point, around empathy, respect, empowerment, team structure. So we do that, and we also get people that have been involved in being recently hired themselves to be part of the hiring process. So, a lot of companies, I think, probably don't have, the last person through the door as part of the hiring process because they don't think they've got enough experience, or they shouldn't necessarily be exposed to the hiring process until they know the company better. I completely disagree with that. I think it's really important that hiring is the responsibility for everybody in the company. So, I'll never be able to meet everyone in the company as we grow. And so, it's about passing down the baton, for another sporting analogy, to make sure that, everyone in the hiring process knows what we're about, knows what the culture is, and can speak to it. And I think that's the only way you can do it, because it's not a sustainable, scalable model for, 2, 3, 4 people to be responsible for all hiring. So it becomes a collective responsibility for people to, sell the culture of the company, and feel and believe the culture of the company, so that they can pass that on to people when they're doing, going through the interview process.
I mean, so again, a couple of excellent points there, Mark. I think that concept of not being there to evaluate the candidate when you bring them in, but rather for let them evaluate you and basically sell you and your culture to them. That is extremely important, and that's, I think, what more and more people look in any kind of new role, that kind of personal fit. And another thing you said, which kind of rings quite strongly with me, is this collaborative effort in hiring. So you're not looking to hire someone and then impose them on your team down somewhere below you, and they have to accept them and do work with them, whether it works or not. Basically, engaging your team in the whole process from the very beginning is critical, and I've seen it in many other places as well. It is important for kind of long-term retention on anyone new who joins the team, really.
Yeah, and I think that's borne out in the retention of the folks that we have hired. We've had very little or very few people leave the organisation, and the one that's most notable that I know all three of us know is Judith, who left us relatively recently. She wrote an amazing post on LinkedIn about what a great experience she'd had with us, and in many ways she wished it had been her last job rather than the first job, right? Because I think she had quite a difficult decision on deciding to leave the business. She left for all the right reasons, and she's a great friend, and we wish her great success, and I'm sure she'll do that. But it was just nice to see some of the things that we stand for were presented back by Judith when she moved on to a next thing. So I think that's a great testament to what we're trying to do, and long may that continue.
Yeah, and it's one of those things of how you, especially these days, trying to build such a strong culture like you have, and then as we started to get to that stage, and then having something like how the world changed, and how you then try and maintain that while also having to embrace remote working on a far more regular basis, is something that I think both we and from what I know, obviously what's going on at BankiFi, you guys have managed to sort of still maintain that as well.
Yeah, but it was and I'm sure everyone's found it the same. It is definitely adding an extra layer of complexity. So whilst we set out from the beginning to have a model of flexibility, and we knew that we were going to build a distributed team. I think it's interesting to see what's happened as a consequence of COVID. I think people used to feel very comfortable with the idea of maybe coming into an office 2 or 3 times a week, and now it's almost gone to the extreme where people don't want to come into an office at all. And that for us isn't necessarily a big thing, because if we've got, between our full-time employees and our staff, augmented staff partners, we've got about 44 people, the vast majority of whom are in a technical discipline. The vast majority of them aren't in and around Manchester, so they're already in a remote working environment. But what we're finding is the folks that are in Manchester and used to come into the office once or twice a week would prefer not to do that. And that I don't think is a problem certainly from a work and a productivity perspective. I would never question anything, because you can always see the outcomes of productivity. You don't need to have people in the office to measure that and see whether it's working or otherwise. But I do think there are some other things that you might lose out on by not having at least some face-to-face time, whether that's on I guess learnings, or just those we talk about the water cooler or the coffee conversations, or information disseminated via osmosis, whatever expression you want to use. I do think that is really is quite difficult to kind of get when you're working in a totally distributed environment. Someone asked me recently, what's the technology? Is there one piece of technology that you could have that would help? And I kind of said, yeah, for those of a certain age, it'd be great to get a Star Trek teleporter so that we could all every now and then go and see folks rather than meet on these things. Things like Donut help, and I just think that there will be, over time, there'll be something that you can't replace, just that, some of that face-to-face time. But I think on the whole, the move to a completely distributed virtual thing, people are just going to have to get used to it, and we'll find ways to work around it. And I don't think it's as big a deal as I've seen some awful commentary from some people that should know better, in the world of TV personalities, about people being lazy and so forth. I mean, it's just garbage. You've got to trust people. It ultimately boils down to trust. But for kind of soft skill enhancement, learning, we're just going to have to work harder and find ways to do it. But we live in this new world, and it ain't going back to the way it was.
No, and I think it's something. I know all the TSF team really wanted to come back, and I know that's something that you were quite a big champion of as well, Alexa. But it is, I think, if you're willing to hire someone, you're inherently trusting them to actually do the job. So where they do that job and what makes them most comfortable. I know it's something that we always kind of said, is we want to make sure people got the tools for the job. And if part of that's where they want to work, then if they work better at home and that makes them more comfortable, then it's what makes your team happiest and most productive for the business.
Absolutely. But it depends, I think, on your personality as well, doesn't it? I like to be around people. I get my energy from people. I'm a classic extrovert. Whereas I think more introverted people who don't get their energy from other people will find the kind of 100% working from home thing perhaps more straightforward. But I think, as we've all experienced, when you do work from home, it is a little bit more challenging to get the delineation of work and work and your kind of personal life. Having an office at home rather than it being your bedroom or your kitchen. Being disciplined to kind of go for your coffee break and not read your emails all the time. I mean, I think there are certain things you can do, but it's each to their own, isn't it? And as I think we're all agreeing, it's the productivity thing is a red herring for me. You can see that very easily without having to have people come into an office and feel like they're being watched over, and you have to do 9 to 5. I think that's a very 20th century view of the world.
And I also think it's in my experience at least, a bit easier to find that kind of productive working relationship in a team, so collaborating, if you at least have some sort of normal non-virtual relationship with them. So I think getting teams together once every month, 2 months, quarter, just for a kind of, even if it's just for a social, makes a big difference in building that cohesion, I think. And I think that's what you do as well, Mark, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, it was during COVID, we did things like escape rooms and murder mysteries, and that went down really, really well. And I think when we got back into the office, we try and we have a town hall every month. We have we have socials where the folks that can make it into the office, we go out for a bite to eat and a couple of drinks, and we get the folks that aren't in the UK, we fly them over and get them into to make sure that we have that team experience face to face. And I just think it's that side of things to understand. To build that culture, you have to understand what makes people tick, and it's not all about what they do at work. It's about just understanding what they like, what they don't like. Who their family is, how many kids they've got, whether they've got kids. All that kind of stuff. I think is treat them like people. Like you treat them like you treat anybody. I think is the kind of way, and you have to do that face to face. Well, I think you don't have to, but it's much more straightforward if you do those things straight face to face.
Yeah, it definitely feels less forced than like you're going through an interview process with someone on a social basis.
Yeah.
Well, I think they're just some of the challenges that I know comes with expansion as a company. Is there anything else that you've really had happen as you've, like, say, because I remember, first hiring like Ryko and Emma right at the start, through to, like, say, where you are now with offices across the globe, 50 staff. How have you found, obviously, both your role and BankiFi generally just changing and some of the challenges with that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, James, because I think you can talk about phases of a company, and in the initial phases, again, you two both experienced it, and you experience it with all of the teams that you work with. As a kind of founder, you end up doing a bit of everything in the early days, So I think from my own personal perspective, what's really changed is, I was getting involved in literally everything in the early days, and now, having built a team, and this is a really important thing from a company perspective. The thing that needs to happen when a company grows and becomes established is you have to remove key person dependency. So you need to get to a point where there isn't one person in the company that if they weren't around for whatever reason, the company would fall apart. And I think we've got to that point now. In my position as, founder, CEO, visionary, I suppose, if that's what you are as a founder and a CEO, we've got people in our company now that, if I wasn't around, they could step into that role. We've got a finance team that look after the finance. We've got, in Marika's team in products, we've got BAs. So if Marika wasn't around, we'd have people that could step into her shoes. We've got architects and delivery teams and scrum masters and testing, a fully automated and manual testing team. So we've, I think what's really changed is we're starting to wear long trousers, if that's the right expression. We've grown up a little bit, and the company hasn't got any, as I say, key person dependencies. And what that means for me, I suppose personally, is that I spend time on things that I like doing, but more importantly, things that I'm good at, and not having to do things that I'm not good at. I'm not an operational person. You guys know me well enough to know that I'm a bit in the clouds, and that I need people around me to, fill in the detail and do the stuff. And from a personal perspective, that's great. And it's also a requirement, because as we grow, people need to have headspace to think about what you do, and why you do it and how you do it, as opposed to kind of scrambling and running, which is what you do all the time as a startup, until you get to that point where you are kind of slowing down and doing things in the right way, and you get the people in that kind of create that team. So it's all about that, hiring people that aren't like yourself. You hire people that fill in the gaps that you haven't got.
No, I think it's always one of the hardest challenges, being one, introspective enough to be able to know and acknowledge this is what I'm not good at, or this is what I don't enjoy doing, and then be in a position to find someone or know someone who can come and complement that role, to then push the business forward, and also really getting the most out of the people who are there, including yourself.
Absolutely, and is it, the introspective thing? It's I think I kind of went into BankiFi knowing that. I went into it with my eyes wide open, knowing that you hear it all the time from investors about they back a team, and the team need to be really good together. So if you just look at myself, Chris, Kirk, Marika, we all bring very different things to the table, but we all respect one another's skill sets and approaches, and it works really, really well. And that's part of making a company successful. It's actually about the people you put together in the team. A lot of people get hung up on your product and your service and everything, but actually, if you haven't got the right team around you, then that makes it incredibly difficult.
I think, to use another football analogy, you'll have to look at the, I guess they're your noisy neighbours now rather than the other way around. How, disharmony in a team can really actually affect what happens going forward, versus obviously what's been happening on the blue side of the city. So
yeah, and I'm not being, as Alexa pointed out earlier, not having any superstars, and not anyone thinking that their role is any more important than anybody else's, and so you don't have a group of individuals, you have a group of people that collectively function, and that way that the company and the team function. So sounds very straightforward, doesn't it? But it's I think it's really important.
And there's so many things though that just sound like common sense. Treating people as people, remembering that you're selling your company to someone as much as they're trying to sell themselves to you. It sounds straightforward when you say it, but there's so many things that I think going on in a founder's life that sometimes they forget those, because they're so focused on different aspects of their business.
Yeah, and I think big advocate of keep things simple. Often the simple things are the things that work really well, and you don't need to overcomplicate things. And common sense is an absolute, and that word pragmatism, which I know we all believe in, is really so. Pragmatism is really important. I never kind of think you've done it. You can always improve on everything, and I think that is a trait that you absolutely need to have as a someone who wants to go and do their own thing. You have to have thick skins, because people will tell you that it's not right, or it doesn't work, or it shouldn't do this or whatever. So that's an important attribute. But to just to always strive to be better is another thing, and that goes throughout the team. And that's that point about empowerment. When you hire people into an organisation, is you want people to be proud of what they do, and if they've done something that they're not proud of, and I don't mean something untoward, I mean something in their own day-to-day work. If they've done something that doesn't work as well as it might, you want them to take the responsibility to sort that out and have pride in their own personal pride in what they do, and that is, I think, another key important attribute.
So there's so much advice there that I think any founder or anyone who's potentially thinking about starting their own journey should really listen to, because obviously someone who's done it, how many times now, Mark? 2, 3?
Well, this is probably you could argue it's the second time. The first time it was, when I moved out to Aussie with and was set up the subsidiary of a business out there. But that was, it was still a very good learning experience, and a lot of those things are definitely, replicable and in this as well. So we'll call it 2.5, James? Split down the middle.
2.5 will do. But of all of those, if there was one sort of piece of advice that you would give someone who's about to embark on their own journey, whether it was in fintech or any other space with a startup, what would that one thing be that you'd really want them to listen to and take on board?
Yeah, I remember when the three of us we did a thing at the tech centre, and Connie came over and hosted the thing, and we kind of, I think I was asked a similar question, and it's, I suppose, now fast forwarding kind of 3 years on from that, that word unicorn, that much misused term unicorn, about, I want to be the next unicorn, and you want to do it for money. The piece of advice I'd give to people is if that's what you're going to do for it, don't go anywhere near doing it. You've got to find a reason and a purpose to do it, and you've got to have, that people talk about the North Star, don't they? And I think you've got to have that reason to do it that always is there. And I always say, if you do what you're doing right, and you look after your customers well, and you very much look after your employees almost as well as you look after your customers, then all of that other stuff looks after itself. But if your strategy or your reason is to do it for money and to become the next unicorn, then that is, just don't do it. And it's kind of interesting you asked the question as we sit here embarking on what is likely to be a pretty difficult economic time for the next couple of years, and you look at the bloodbath in fintech and tech, you look at the money that's drying up in kind of in the investment community, and the multiples on various different technology companies, that kind of tells you everything you need to know, right? Because I think what will happen, as it always does, is good companies that have a real business and do it for the right reasons will come out the other side. And all of those tech companies that are speculative and, looking for a problem to solve won't. And, I think it's that kind of stuff. So, have a reason, find a problem to solve, try and make something better. Do it differently, but don't do it differently for the sake of doing something different. Don't fix what's not broken, but certainly don't ever do it for money.
No, I think that's always something we've looked at when any, yourself included, when we start looking at a startup and whether we're going to work with them, is there a genuine problem and why they're doing it? And it's one of the reasons I think we really enjoyed working with you and working with all the startups that we have done, because they are looking to solve a problem, and solving the problem well will bring in revenue, will bring in income, and allow for scale. And hopefully, a couple of them can reach the sort of scale that you guys have managed to get to, because the problems are genuine, the solutions are good. And it's when people approach it with, usually they've got a forecast that they're going to make 300 million in year 2, and go, do you know what? I think your motivations might be slightly askew here. But no, I think that's probably the best piece of advice anyone could take for anything, to be honest. Always do it for the right reason.
And I think, I mean, entrepreneurs listening to this should pay attention to your journey, Mark, because I remember when we started, it was your vision, but you were doing a lot of other things as well. So sales, product, that were we were also doing tech together. But we managed to work hard, and you work extremely hard to get that, but also recognize where the gaps, and then bring the people to take some of these things forward. And that's why I think successfully grown the company relatively quickly to this size. But something you said before as well, you still do other bits, you still fill the gaps, even if it's something as for some maybe mundane, like testing and things like that, but you're still quite close to it. I think that's what founders need to understand. So it's never kind of a one-way journey. It's staying grounded, working hard when needed, but also recognizing when you can need to grow and delegate and bring people around you as well.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I would say to all of that, and you're absolutely right, Alexa, and I do that partly because I like it. I like doing some of those things, but partly because I think it keeps me in touch with the people that are doing those things. It gives me opportunity to get to know them and them to get to know me. But also, yeah, the other thing, James, to answer the question as well, is you need a little bit of humility, right? I mean, I think a lot of people, it seems to have become really cool and trendy and fashionable and great to be, I don't like using the word entrepreneur. It's kind of, but it seems to be that's like, it's a bit like being an influencer, isn't it? Oh, I'm an entrepreneur or I'm an influencer. It's kind of, I think people who've not done it don't understand how bloody hard it is and how lonely it can be. And, I think if you think that you've made it and everything's great, then again, you shouldn't be in it, because it sets all the wrong tone for everything. So a bit of humility. I know if we carry on growing this and building this, and it becomes very successful, and the last thing I would probably want to do is when people ask me to get involved in helping them and advising them, is to think I know what their journey is going to be like, and what just because I've been relatively successful, does that mean that I'm going to be successful in the next thing I do, or that I can impart my knowledge on something and think that I now know everything? And the answer's got to be no on that. So a great example of that is some mutual people that we know, that Holly and Laura at Financio, right? We both, all of us, are helping them, and we like to see people's journeys, and we like to see people be successful, people that work hard particularly to be successful. But I can't tell Holly and Laura about everything that they're going to encounter on their journey, but perhaps we can help them not make some of the mistakes that we've made, right? Because I think that's the other thing. We all know that there's a lot of mistakes made in these journeys, and there's a lot of luck involved as well, an awful lot of luck. And, so that bit of humility should stay with people too.
Yeah, I think there's so many pitfalls when you're first starting, and especially when you're doing everything at once like you did. I remember logging into Jira one day, and you'd been writing tickets at like 11:30 at night or something for the dev team to look at.
I don't enjoy that bit anymore, James.
But it's that sort of being willing to do everything, but knowing that while you're doing everything, there are going to be mistakes made. And if you can help people and guide people past those and going, this is some things that we did wrong, not that they will, and you'll have different challenges. But like I say, it's when people use unicorns for, it's like overnight successes as well. I don't think there's no such thing.
No, absolutely not. There's a reason it's referred to as a unicorn. It's probably a dream that'll never happen, right? So.
But no, I think we've, because also I think we could talk to you for hours, Mark, to be honest, and that's before we even start talking about football. So I think, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much, Alexa, and look forward to seeing you at the next Pragmatic CTO event. I think you're attending, aren't you, Mark?
Absolutely, and just a big thank you to you two and Ian and Guy as well. Without you guys, and in the early days, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are. So for anyone that's thinking about getting their business going, then they should come along and have a chat with you guys. So yeah, big thank you to you two as well.
No, thank you very much, Mark. And it's been a genuine pleasure working with you over the years, and hopefully for many more to come.
Likewise, guys. Likewise, and I shall definitely see you at the Pragmatic CTO.
Cool. I'll see
Looking
you
forward
soon.
to that. See you soon. Thanks,
Right,
James.
take care, guys.
Right, I think that just about wraps things up here. If you have any thoughts or questions on anything we said today, get in touch, whether that be through our Twitter @RealTSF or email at hello@Thestartupfactory.tech, or feel free to drop in for a coffee and a chat. As ever, thanks for listening.